This week on Theater Talk.
Almost all of my characters have a truthful life and a lie at the heart of their lives, and Tate's the guy that does that.
So you're saying I'm a liar?
You might be a liar. You have to believe that he's telling the truth, and then also suspect he may be telling a lie.
Okay.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
It's good you got out, right?
I guess.
Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't, though?
What do you mean?
If you hadn't been going off to UPenn, you think we would have stayed together?
Christ, Maggie, let's not do this. She's coming right back.
You haven't wondered, though?
Come on, it was a summer thing. Kids have those. I'm sure you had them after me.
Not really.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
Good People is a really wonderful, wonderful play. It's at the Manhattan Theater Club and was written by one of my favorite people, the Pulitzer Prize winner, David Lindsay-Abaire. And with him here on Theater Talk is Tate Donovan, that movie star who we all loved seeing Murdered in Damages last season. Welcome to Theater Talk, both of you. David, who are the good people that you're writing about in this play?
They're the people that I grew up with. Friends and family from South Boston, which is a working class neighborhood in Boston where I grew up. I love them desperately, and it took me a long time, but I finally have written about them.
Why did it take you so long? Because many people have said to me that this is the most autobiographical play that you've written.
I wouldn't say autobiographical. It's certainly the most personal play that I've written. I think because I respect and love the people so much, I felt like I had to mature both as a person and a writer and have a really clear point of view about what it was that I was writing about. I didn't, you know, those early plays that were really absurdist comedies, and I felt like I couldn't give the people that I grew up with that kind of treatment because they're so not ridiculous people.
These people are in serious straits, except for Tate's character. They're in dire financial straits. Is that always true, or is this a phenomena of the financial times we're in right now?
You mean in Southie?
Yeah.
Well, the neighborhood is, as I've said, incredibly working class, so it's not an affluent neighborhood. You know, I think now is probably a little more dire than other times because the economy is what it is, but it was never a place of affluence. It was always a, you know, working class.
Hard scrabble is the phrase I think they use. And Tate, your character is interesting because you're the one who has gotten out of this neighborhood. You've become a doctor, successful doctor, and in some ways you're kind of closing the door on your past. Why?
Well, he has a sort of complicated view of his past. I think he has a nostalgia for it. I think he likes saying he's from Southie, and he likes the idea that he sort of pulled himself up out of there through hard work and stuff like that. But when it comes in the form, Frances McDormand comes and sort of hits me up for a job. Her character's name is Maggie.
And you had all been friends back in that old
back in the day. I hadn't seen her for 30 years.
Right.
And since I was 17 when I went off to college.
And she comes crashing into your bourgeois life.
She comes into my office and sort of tries to hit me up for a job, and it's pretty awkward and pretty tough, but funny.
And I have to ask you, since you came from that neighborhood, David, and you are now a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, very successful in your own right, is Tate playing you, who got out of the neighborhood and made it and is living a very comfortable New York life now?
You know, I am every character in this play. A part of me is Tate.
Well, let's say that he got a scholarship from Boys and Girls Club, and my character gets a scholarship, and that's how he gets out of Southie. But I think the major difference is, and I'm totally speaking for him right now,
it's better.
Is that my character really doesn't appreciate the concept of luck. That luck had nothing to do with it. He worked hard, and every time Margaret talks about, you were lucky, you were, you know. Yeah. You had all the advantages. I bristle, and I don't like that. Whereas David realizes how lucky he was.
And that David's done more than David is willing to admit. you know, in other words, David's had luck, but David is also a brilliantly talented person, and yet he'll say, "Oh, it was."
Well,
luck.
let's let David.
Yeah.
Let's let David.
No, I don't think you should. Don't let him talk. Seriously. No, you don't want that.
I'm so happy to be here today.
Oh, I didn't even know you were here. I'm sorry.
Have you run away from the old neighborhood, and when those old friends of yours come crashing back and begging for a job and money, do you
Well, first of all,
close
that
the
has
door on
not
that?
happened, and I would never close the door. I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am. At the same time, I've been incredibly lucky, and I embrace my neighborhood. It has defined me as a person, as a man, as a father, certainly as a writer, and it would be foolish of me to feel any kind of ambivalence, which is what his character does. You know, when I got the scholarship, it was in 7th grade. I was 11 years old, and this scholarship that I got through the Boys Club came up only once every 6 years, and so I had to be the exact right age and the exact right year that it came up. And so already there's like a lottery inside a lottery. What I just found out a couple weeks ago when I went up to Southie and met with these women that supported me back in the day at the Boys Club, I did not know that the scholarship was an athletic scholarship. And that it was these women. I was not an athlete, unlike every other kid that grew up in Southie. I was the arty kid that did all this writing and poetry and arts and crafts. And they were the ones that said, we have to submit David for it. I know he's not an athlete, but let's do that. And I only found that out 2 weeks ago, that it was these women that pushed me forward. So again, like, forget the fact that I was the right age for the scholarship. I wasn't even an athlete, but these women pushed me forward anyway. So luck is a huge part of it. That said, if I didn't apply myself and work really hard, nothing would have come of that luck.
Right, right. Are you where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
Because you do a terrific working class South Boston accent in the play. And
Thanks.
That, I mean, did he teach you how to do that? Or
Kind of.
How does one learn that?
We had a
dialect coach, Charlotte Fleck, who's great. But you know, every once in a while we'd be like, how do you, and he'd be like, yeah, you know, he would definitely help us out.
Because you don't have it anymore. Did you ever have it?
Yes, in fact, I still, whenever I talk to my family, it comes back immediately. It's like being bilingual.
Can we hear a little bit about the real David Lindsay-Abaire?
What is the real David?
Let's be honest.
My father worked in the furniture department at Jordan Marsh.
Now that's good.
Which isn't true. My father didn't, but I love all those.
Yeah. So you would turn to him a little bit, despite.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, you give me notes every once in a while.
This is such a remarkable and wonderful play. And Tate, why do you know it's a wonderful play? What about it? What can we tell our audience? What makes it so great?
Yeah, this is my favorite question.
Yeah. Because you know, when I saw this, I just thought, that's it.
You know, it talks about such important stuff, and you know, I think America is going through a very rough time in terms of class and unemployment, and this play tackles these giant issues, but you'd never know it. It's a hysterical, great, fun play about a woman, you know, from this bad neighborhood runs across an old boyfriend, and every single line that every character said, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I would have said. Yep, that's right. You know, it's like everything is just very emotionally true, except for my stuff, which I can't quite. I wanted to talk to you about. I don't understand why.
Do you like the fact that he just kind of made you the heavy in the play? Because before we started, I said, you're the heavy again. You said, I don't see him that way.
I know. Well, I have to tell you, when I read the play, I was like, I'm a great guy. I'm one of the good guys. I had no idea that I would be considered the heavy. It was only in rehearsal where everyone would sit around and talk about what a liar I was and what a terrible guy I was. And blah, blah, blah. I was like, actually, Renee, who plays my wife, turned to me and she said, how does this all make you feel? You know, and I was in shock. I was like, I'm like, uh-oh. And I turned to you. I said, I was like, you know, the audience is going to hate me. I can't believe they're going to hate me.
But they don't.
They don't.
No, they don't.
I mean, none of the characters are without flaws.
Yeah, yeah.
They're all, you know, flawed individuals.
Some
so there
my
are no
flaws
villains.
seem to be a little bit more prominent
Depends
than others.
who you ask. Some people think that this
Okay,
guy's totally
if you ask
right.
a woman,
Well, but
you see my flaws.
I superficially asked you at the beginning who are the good people, and yet one of the things that's so profound about this play is you keep changing who do we think are the good people, and who are the whose values are correct in this play, and you keep making us change our assertion.
Yeah,
that's fun to be in the theater. I didn't even know when I wrote it how visceral you would feel the alliances shift in the audience.
Yep.
Speaking as a man, I must say, I thought the Frances McDormand character, the woman who comes from the neighborhood, was crashing into his world. She, to me, is the one that I would be wary of. She's the one that I thought, keep that woman away from
That's because you're a
she
Republican.
Because she can bring you down.
That's exactly right.
She can bring you down.
I know. Yeah.
And she might bring him down.
But she doesn't bring him down.
No.
You're terrified
She
of her.
kind of
That's
does
just
in a
more-
way. She kind of does in a way.
You bring yourself down. But
Hey.
she's just opening some cans of worms.
Are you moving now with this play in a more naturalistic, realistic direction in your writing? Because you're famous for the absurdist kind of things that you've done in the past.
Let's go to the part where you said I was famous.
This is a
Right, but Rabbit Hole was naturalistic.
yeah,
before
that's
this.
true. That's true.
Honestly, every play, Rabbit Hole was a much more conscious decision to write something naturalistic. This play, it just felt like this is what it needed to be. I think every story will dictate its form. And, you know, I have a new play that is in my head that feels incredibly whimsical and absurdist and much more like the old plays. And yet the structure, it feels more formal like these naturalistic plays are. So
You're
I don't
putting the two
know.
together, perhaps.
I hope, we'll see.
Have you become sort of a premier interpreter of his work now?
Yeah, he refuses now to do a play without me.
Why is that, do you think? Why? I mean, can you just talk a little bit about this relationship that you guys now have in the theater?
Geez, that's fantastic. I'm so psyched that we have a relationship in the theater. Is that true? So we're going to do the next play together? Yeah? Great. So listen, I was just curious. There's this character that you're the new
His heart is going to be broken.
Yeah, I know. But he said that we have a relationship in the theater.
I mean, he's you're going to be writing plays for him, the old star.
Yeah.
People. You're going to be writing for this man.
Right. Mary Louise
Tate.
Park may have something to say about that.
Come on.
Yes, I'm happy to have Tate in whatever I do.
But it also is, why Tate, though? I mean, what is about this actor that you find?
Because John Slattery wasn't available. And
Don't stop writing yourself down.
No, here's the thing about Tate. He is an incredibly mercurial actor. And this character is of two worlds. He's a guy that you have to believe came from the old neighborhood. You also have to believe that he can travel in the circles that he travels in, Chestnut Hill. And so I love to hire actors that can be in both worlds at the same time. And Tate's the guy that does that. Those are almost all of my characters have a truthful life and a lie at the heart of their lives. And he can do that very well.
A high compliment.
that is. So you're saying I'm a liar?
You might be a liar. You have to believe that he's telling the truth, and then
In a
also
particular
suspect he
moment
may be
where-
telling a lie.
Well, that's what the play's about, though. We don't really know, as Susan says, who are the good people. It changes with each scene as the play moves along. David, Lindsay-Abaire, Tate Donovan. The play is Good People at the Manhattan Theater Club. Don't miss it. Thanks for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I got a job. I got a bunch of jobs, in fact. And every one of them sucked because what other kind of job could I get? Not much choice there either, I'm
You
afraid.
lost most of those jobs?
As a matter of fact, I did.
Why?
Usually because I was late.
Well, there's the choice.
Would you stop
She
it?
chose to be late.
I didn't choose to be late. It happened that made me late.
You don't have to explain yourself.
One time I got my car taken. Why did I lose my car? Because I missed a payment. Why did I miss a payment? Because I had to pay a dentist
We don't
instead.
need the sob
Why did I have to
story.
pay a dentist? No, I have done this 100 times in my head, Mikey. I think you should hear it too. Why did I have to pay a dentist? Because I didn't have insurance and I cracked a tooth. And I ignored it for 6 months until an abscess formed. Why did I crack a tooth?
I don't care.
Because one night I thought I'd save a little money and skip dinner, but I got hungry, so I snacked on a piece of candy brittle instead. And that is all it took. One piece of candy brittle, and I was out of a f***ing job again. And that's the way it always is.
You're the top. You're Mahatma Gandhi. You're the top. You're Napoleon Brandy. You're the purple light of a summer night in Spain. You're the National Gallery. You're Garbo Sour. You're cellophane.
Anything Goes is just about to open at the Roundabout Theater Company. It has a score, of course, by Cole Porter, but has a really wonderful book by Russell Crouse and Howard Lindsay, the team Lindsay and Crouse, who also wrote The Sound of Music. The book, though, has been revised somewhat for this production by Russell Crouse's son, Timothy Crouse, along with his friend John Weidman. Timothy Crouse is a celebrated journalist in his own right. He wrote one of the best books, Susan, that I know of about politics and journalism called The Boys at the Back of the Bus. And we're very happy that he is with us here tonight on Theater Talk to talk about theater and politics.
Thank you.
Why does your father's book, To Anything Goes, need revising?
All right. Probably the easiest way to explain that is to go back to the beginning. 1934, there was a producer named Vinton Friedley.
Yeah.
And Vinton Friedley had put together a package, and the package consisted of score by Cole Porter, stars Ethel Merman, Victor Moore, William Gaxton, and a book by Guy Bolton and P.G. Wodehouse, who were in England. And they sent in the book. It arrived just before rehearsal. And for whatever reasons, Vinton Friedley didn't think it worked. And they were in England. And then to completely put the kibosh on it, one of the components of the plot in the book was a fire on the ship. And the Morro Castle, which was a cruise boat, caught fire off the Jersey coast. And it was a horrible, horrible catastrophe. And that was the end of that. So Vinton Friedley went to the director of the show, Howard Lindsay, and said, "You got to rewrite the book for me."
We can't have a ship catching fire. It's like a show that would have been about a building being bombed at the time of the World Trade Center.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And Howard said, "Look, I'm staging the show. You got to get someone to help me." And that someone turned out to be my father, Russell Crouse. And I don't know for sure, but I think the book was, they essentially had to write a new book. And I think they accomplished that in about 2 weeks, at the most. And what makes that feat especially amazing is that they both had a day job. My father was the press agent for the Theater Guild. Right. And they completed the final scene of the book on the train up to the tryout town, which was Boston. And the
very old school.
Very old school. And the night of the first performance in Boston, they both stood outside the theater, the Colonial, and they begged their friends who had come up from New York not to go in. The friends went in, and their friends had a good time, and everybody else had a good time. And it came into New York, and it was a huge hit. That was the beginning of the partnership between my father and Howard. Right. And that was a partnership that resulted in 14 or 15 plays, among them Life with Father and State of the Union and The Sound of Music. They were meticulous craftsmen. They worked, they outlined, they discussed for months, and in the case of Life with Father, for a couple of years before they began on the dialogue. This thing that they'd written in 2 weeks, they felt just...
Was a little slipshod from their point of view?
From their point of view, was a little slipshod. And they never got around to going back to it because they were always producing something new. Right. My mother, in the 1980s, felt, and had always felt, that it was a wonderful property, but it had to be rewritten. And she sort of commissioned John and me. John is my friend going back to college, where we roomed together.
Weren't you?
Harvard.
Harvard, yeah.
We were at Harvard. We wrote a Hasty Pudding show together. We wrote sketches together. We did.
And we should say that John wrote Pacific Overtures and Assassins with Steve Sondheim.
John is the gold standard of collaborators. And the situation was, for us, it was as if you bought a landmark house that had been built in 1934. And you loved the house, you loved the architecture. But there were things about the house that, now that it's 50 years after, 75 years after, that weren't going to work. And when we read the 34 script, it seemed clear to us that the two things that needed most to be brought up to code, so to speak, were the pace and the stakes. The things that had happened to musical comedies, the Rodgers and Hammerstein revolution and the Sondheim
The things that your father helped revolutionize too. Your father has moved on
later on,
that.
Absolutely. But everything that all these guys did in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and onwards had made the script in that way obsolete. The pace was on the leisurely side. And it wasn't that the songs didn't advance the story, but they just didn't advance the story very far. And we had to tighten that up. So we wrote a lot of new dialogue. We wrote a lot of new jokes. We moved songs around. We used songs for different purposes.
And didn't you bring in some songs from other musicals?
Yes. Yeah. There had been another version of Anything Goes in '62 that brought in a couple of other songs from a couple of other Cole Porter songs. But we brought in songs from the '34 show that had been cut in 1934. Easy to Love, which is a beautiful song.
Yeah, absolutely.
We put it back because it's such a gorgeous song.
I want to talk a bit about this book, the boys. I always call it The Boys on the Back of the Bus, but The Boys on the Bus.
The Boys on the Bus.
Yeah, I don't know. I call it the back of the bus because I guess the plane, the press is sitting in the back of the plane all the time. Absolutely brilliant book covering the 1972 presidential campaign.
Thank you.
And the first book that really looked at the press corps covering it. Before, you know, you had the real stars of the press now, like, you know, Hardball, Chris Matthews, and Sam Donaldson, I remember that kind of stuff. What got you thinking about writing a book about the press guys rather than the candidates?
The way that started was I was on the Rolling Stone staff, and I'd been writing the music stories, I mean, about, you know, Sly Stone, Joe Cocker, people like that. But I was interested in politics, and in '72 there was a big sort of a gathering of the tribe in Big Sur of all the Rolling Stone reporters, and Hunter Thompson was there, and Hunter Thompson was going to cover the McGovern-Nixon campaign for the paper, and he wanted somebody to do it with him, and there wasn't anybody else who was interested, and I could hardly wait.
Yeah.
So we got to New Hampshire, which was the first of the primaries, and I began to be interested in the reporters myself, and it was partly because my father, before he was a playwright, was a newspaper man, and before I knew him was a newspaper man, and he had told me lots of stories about the newspaper life, and I got the bug from that. And he had told me about traveling on the train with baseball teams and stuff like that, and all the pranks that were played, and it just sounded like this wonderful world, and I thought that it was gone forever. And I got on the bus, and there it was. And so I decided, Hunter was going to do the main campaign stories, and I needed something juicy that was a little on the side of that. Featurey, and that was the perfect thing.
And the guys that you covered, I mean, some of the names are lost now, but they were wonderful characters. Robert Novak was on the bus. Jack Germond was on the bus. Who were some of the others of that time?
David Broder, whom we just lost, who was a wonderful reporter. Johnny Apple, who was a phenomenon. Jules Whitcover, a guy named him. And there were wonderful people from the networks who were gone, like Cassie Mackin, who worked for NBC and was a really terrific and very brave reporter.
Germond and Whitcover and Novak, were those guys at the bar drinking, mixing with the candidates? Was it a whole different kind of world then? Was it a little easier to move with the people that you were covering?
It depended on the campaign. And that, in a way, is what the book is about. The Nixon campaign was just an exercise in stonewalling. They were sitting on the biggest scandal of the century, and there was no way for anybody to get at it.
And yet we all knew about it, and yet they wouldn't report it. That's right.
Well, except for Woodward and
Bernstein. Right.
Bernstein, and the attitude of the rest of the press was to jump on them and to try to tear their stories apart, which wasn't very helpful.
Right, because of the competition of the press and run them down because they have something that we should have.
Exactly. But on the other side, the McGovern campaign was totally open, completely open, and everybody was hanging out with everybody else. And there was, I don't know how it still is, but there was a tremendous amount of drinking going on, and everybody had a very good time.
You focus so much on the valiant camaraderie of the McGovern reporters and the arc of just when they more and more realize how hopeless it is, and yet they become more attached to it. And you were in that group. Yes. Did that have an influence on your political perspective to be involved in something that ultimately was so disappointing?
That's a hard question to answer. I'd say that was one of the disappointments along the way that I've suffered over the years in just being an observer of politics. I mean, somehow the country seems to have taken a wide detour from common sense, and I don't know if you could say that it started then or not. McGovern was somebody that I liked a lot personally. He was a very decent guy. And because of this, of the supposed fairness of the press, this idea of, well, it's the idea of false equivalencies that you still see around a lot. And the basic idea is, you know, X hits Y in the kidneys for half an hour, in the course of which Y gives X a feeble kick in the shins. And the way it's reported is blows were exchanged on both sides.
In equal part, yeah.
Right. And you see that again and again. You saw that in the healthcare debate. And somehow that hasn't been cured. No. The only thing that we have now that we didn't have then are people like Jon Stewart and Colbert and the jesters who have the license to say things.
Timothy Crouse, thank you for being our guest tonight. The show is Anything Goes, one of my most famous shows of all time, written by Cole Porter, Howard Lindsay, and Russell Crouse, and revised by Timothy Crouse and John Weidman.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
Really fun.
And though I'm not a great romancer, I know that you're bound to answer when I propose. Anything goes.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Loewe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.